Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, collectors of all ages, it is Aussieverse, and we are back for a very special edition on 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning. What the hell are we doing here at this time? Well, let me tell you something, boys and girls. He heeded the call. We reached out all the way from New York City. We have co-creator, founder of Lifeline Comics. It is Phil Falco.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome.
Welcome, mate.
Thank you.
Phil, thank you so much for joining us, man. It is such an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad we were able to make it happen. I love seeing Slice of Life in the background behind you.
Yes, exactly right. Thank you, mate. Thank you. So I reached out through Kickstarter. I said, mate, would you happen to be ever free to come onto Aussieverse? And Phil turned around and said yes. It blew me away that he said yes. Here we are now. Let's get straight into it because we have plenty to talk about because you guys have so much on. You're so busy. So yeah, Slice of Life, ladies and gentlemen, is a Kickstarter that I contributed to. I got the hardcover edition because, as you know, all about collected editions here, and this is what I wanted. It was a completely blind buy. I had no idea about Lifeline Comics before. I had no idea about Phil before. I just read the synopsis and I went, yeah, let's give it a gamble. Let's go. And I'm glad I did. Phil, where did this gem come from? Tell us about Slice of Life.
Absolutely. I love hearing it's a blind buy because we do Kickstarters, Lifeline Comics, about twice a month, and we're always like, we're going for those blind buys, those people who otherwise wouldn't have found us. But Slice of Life, it's a queer romance. It's about an anime character, Lady Vengeance, who comes to life, has to learn to live in the real world, and then ends up falling in love with a closeted cheerleader. So it's a story all about learning who you are as a teenager, figuring out who you are, what you love, from the lens of a formerly fictional character. And you can see our big first kiss on the back of our hardcover there. Slice of Life is a webcomic first. We published to Webtoon, Tapas, the major webcomic platforms, and then it has its second life on Kickstarter, where we do the printed editions that we're seeing here. All of the Kickstarter editions, all the printed comics and the digital copies that you get through Kickstarter have exclusive stories. So I think that trade, that hardcover there has 232 pages, of which I believe about 20 are exclusive to it, not on the webcomic version. And the Webtoon has somewhere like 65,000 subscribers. We have a really loyal and active fan base, which is so rewarding. And I co-created with Kat Calamia, who couldn't be here today, but she's the other half of Lifeline Comics and the other one who helps us stay as busy as we do.
Yeah, no, it's really well put together, man, because sometimes when you get these hardcovers, they don't come so well packaged. And this I was actually really impressed with. And that spine as well, it's just beautiful too. So I put it on my little Kickstarter section, which isn't very big. I've only been into Kickstarters for about a year or so now. But yeah, I'm very, very happy to add that to the collection.
Every shelf starts off with just one book, so I'm sure that Kickstarter section will be huge soon.
That is true. So tell us about Lifeline Comics. Where'd you get the name from? How'd that start?
Oh, that's a funny story. So Lifeline Comics is it's the publisher name for myself and Kat Calamia, the co-creator of Slice of Life, and most of our other books are collaborations. And we started out, we were just friends, like independent of comics, where she had been self-publishing her own book and working with a small publisher at the time, her own superhero book. And I got into publishing with my horror book, Haunting. We were publishing independently of each other, but we were friends, so we were always just sharing advice with each other, reading each other's scripts, helping level up and find new fans, and tabling at conventions. And then after a couple of years of this, we were like, oh, why don't we do a crossover, try to merge our fan bases, superheroes meet the supernatural kind of thing. And it was one of the most enjoyable experiences of either of our careers. We found out that writing together, we really cover a lot of bases for each other. We can really openly criticize each other and find ways to improve. And from there we were like, oh, let's keep doing this. And then Slice of Life was our next collaboration, where we both love Webtoon. We're both queer creators and wanted to tell a queer story, which neither of us had done up to that point. So we made Slice of Life, which was very popular, thankfully. And after that, it was like, okay, why don't we just now we have upward more. I think we have like 12 to 13 unique series, some of which are like anthologies, collections of short stories that others contribute to. But I would say probably 8 to 10 of which I don't even know how many series I have. That's so embarrassing. But now we have tons of books. We release Kickstarters at least once a month, sometimes twice a month to crowdfund our new issues. Everything starts Kickstarter, and then we sell at cons, we sell online. And Lifeline Comics, the name. It's goofy, but Kat and I went on a trip to Disney World once, and she's like a Disney expert. I've only been there once, had only been there once before, and she kept telling me about the magic wristband you have, how it like, it's your key to your room, it's your credit card, it's like the most important thing. And she's like, don't lose this, it's your lifeline. And I lose everything. So she kept drilling into my head. She's like, it's your lifeline, your lifeline. And then I was like, that should be the name of our comic company, and it kind of stuck.
Seeing how you've got so many followers with your work, what do you think it's so attractive to them? What is it about the work that is putting all the people in?
I think honestly it's the diversity, and I mean that in both meanings of the word, where we're committed to telling like diverse stories, which includes like diverse race and ethnicity, diverse sexuality or gender identity, but also just variety. We have horror, we have superhero, we have different kinds of superhero, from like your Supergirl, Spider-Girl inspired, teen girl superhero book to like dark, gritty, like Batman inspired. And then, we have horror, we have a lot of different queer romances that range from like wholesome, like slice of life, to like a whole line of not safe for work adult books, including like, some vampire books, based on IPs like Wizard of Oz and Snow White. So we always say, you pick up different people with every project, and they bleed over. There's no monolith. Everybody, like, I'm super into horror, but I also love just like a good wholesome romance. And it's been really cool seeing the bleed over. Just today, actually, I was reading, whenever we send out a Kickstarter survey to collect information, like how to ship rewards, we also say, oh, like, if you want to share, how did you find us? And I was looking at the surveys for one of our most recent adult books, and we had so many people who were just like, oh, I really like your webtoon. I've been waiting for like the right property to check out, and I love witches, so I was like, let me jump on this one. It's really cool. So it's been cool seeing like the bleed over. Webtoon's a great platform for finding readership because it's free. There's no barrier to entry, so you can get a lot of readership there. And then if they like you enough, sometimes they're willing to take the plunge and check out some of your paid content.
So Phil, how long has the Webtoon been going for now?
I think it just hit its 3-year anniversary, actually. We started in July of 2021, and now we're in August. So we're just past the 3-year anniversary, and I realized we didn't celebrate. That's so sad.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Well, congratulations on the milestone.
Thank you.
So how does that work when it comes to properties that I would assume you're not allowed to touch, but obviously you are, like Wizards of Oz and things like that? Mm-hmm. Is there a process you have to go through to be able to be allowed to use those properties?
It depends on where the property lies. So in the public domain, as they refer, and different countries have different rules, but properties like the Wizard of Oz, where the creator, Baum, has been dead for quite a while now, is public domain in most countries, where as long as you're not taking copyrighted work. So, okay, this is where it gets complicated. The original Oz novels, most of them, not all of them, are public domain. So you can use the characters and situations featured there. But the Wizard of Oz film from the 1930s, that is probably the most well-known part of the franchise, that's not public domain. So stuff that's specific to that movie, no one can touch without permission from the studio that owns it, which we don't have. But the public domain version, the original novel version, as long as we're sticking to that or our own original ideas, then it's fair game. Same with like a fairy tale like Snow White. One of our books is a vampire Snow White book. So as long as we're not doing something that's specific to, say, the Disney version, or like the Snow White and the Huntsman movie that came out a few years ago, I forget which studio even produced that, but as long as we are not infringing upon copyrighted work that is not in the public domain, we can do our own spin on it. Simple example, the ruby slippers in The Wizard of Oz, that's movie exclusive. No one could do ruby slippers, but the original novels have silver slippers. That's a go.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that's the workaround. Exactly. So that's the workaround. To use such properties, do you need to do a whole lot of research to know what you can touch and one you can't?
Whenever we start a new property that's based on an IP, based on an intellectual, whenever we start a new comic based on an intellectual property, the first phase is a lot of research. Yeah, where for the Oz, we read some of the Wizard of Oz books. We watched like the movie. We watched Wicked to know what came before us. We can't do anything that's specific to the movie or to the Wicked Broadway show and movie coming up, but it's good to know what other adaptations have done before you, stuff that you know to avoid, or also like to put your own spin on. You know, one of the reasons we did our Oz inspired book is, which I've been referring to quite a lot because it's our most recent one. It's called The Witches of Oz, and it's a romance between the Wicked Witch and Glinda, the Good Witch. And a big part of the reason we went for that is because Wicked, I love the musical, and I've always been, and a lot of people really see the relationship in that play as like, you know, being underlyingly queer and romantic. And no one's really ever taken the plunge in telling like a queer story with that. So we were like, oh, why don't we do our own spin? And, you know, it's not Wicked. They're not in school. We don't have like items. We don't have music. We don't have things that are specific to that musical, but it's kind of taking what someone else has done before you, putting your own spin on it, not infringing on anybody else's ideas, and then doing a lot of research to see what you can and can't do. And, you know, research is a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's cool, like entering a world and making yourself kind of an expert on it before you start like taking it apart and putting your own spin on it.
And navigating through it must be just like a minefield.
Yeah.
It's definitely a little bit of a minefield. There's definitely a lot of things to watch out for, but thankfully there's a lot of resources I found, because a lot of people, the reason, aside for just, you know, fandom, just like being a big fan of like The Wizard of Oz or Snow White, but one of the reasons that adaptations of these properties are so popular is because it's such an easy sell. You know, we have a lot of our own series like Slice of Life or, you know, our superhero books where it's completely original, where it's a lot harder to pitch that to just a random person. You have like 3 seconds to convince them at a convention. It's like, oh, this is a horror book. This is the hook. Not to say that people aren't willing to check out original properties, but a lot of the time it's an easier sell to be like, oh, do you like Snow White? She's a vampire here and it's a sexy book. And then they're like, okay, let me just slap my whole wallet down for that. So that's part of the reason why a lot of people go for the IPs. And that's why there's a lot of resources online to help you kind of navigate that minefield.
So are there other collected editions like this Slice of Life that I've missed out on from yourself?
We have right now, our horror book has a volume out right now, Haunting. We release as single issues and then eventually collect as the trades in softcover and hardcover. So right now, our horror book Haunting, our superhero book Like Father Like Daughter has 2 volumes out. And those are the only ones that have the collected volumes right now. Once we hit usually around the 4-issue mark, we'll do a collection. So eventually those other books that I was referencing, once we hit the 4-issue mark, we'll put them together as a graphic novel, and then they can start to fill up your shelf a little bit.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, when the show's done, if you can, we'll make sure that I get those links to get the right ones, because I want to get them. Have a little Lifeline Comics section on my shelf. That'd be fantastic.
I love that.
What was the next thing I was going to... Oh, yeah, that's right. So I don't know if you can reveal this. And if you can't, don't worry about it. But I've read Slice of Life, right? I reread it just the other day to make sure that I was prepared. And I got to ask, Phil, do we ever find out how the character came into the world at all? Or is that just going to be a mystery?
I'll say, as of this moment, more details are coming to light. You know, yeah. I think the story is about an anime character who comes to life, and like we kind of intentionally skip past the how did it happen. Like there yeah. I'd say there's like a little. I'd say you can theorize when it does happen, but the story is about her learning to be a real person and it's a slice of life story, like the genre. So it's about her doing the daily activities that make her kind of learn who she is and how to be a real person. But something happens in the second volume that I won't spoil. That is just happening now in the webcomic version that'll eventually be collected, that makes them look again and be like, all right, how did this actually happen? And it's coming more to light. It's not the most important part of the story for us. That's why we wanted to spend the time with the characters, but it is obviously a huge question and part of our lore and something that we wholly intend to explore. And we're really thankful that our audience has been patient with that. Like, you know, we definitely really want to focus on the character story. And there's always been people like, so how did she come to life exactly? We're like, don't worry, like we'll get there, and we're getting there.
So before we take a look at all your work here as well, let's ask some general comic questions. What is it that got you into comics, and what are you into yourself?
I'm a huge fan of horror comics. I think some of the obvious, aside for like, your classics that everyone's read, like, I was a big Batman fan growing up. So the first comics I read were like Batman comics. But the first time I started expanding outside of Batman is like, oh, I love horror. I want to read some horror books. So I would read like Swamp Thing was a big entry point for me. I was like, oh, this is DC. I like Batman. I like DC, and I like horror. So let me read this. And I was like, this is fantastic. This Alan Moore guy is fantastic. Let me read more of that. And now the bulk of what I read is horror. I'm always so behind on current comics. So like, I'm always like playing catch up, like a couple of years behind. I've been reading Something is Killing the Children, which is absolutely masterpiece. And, I think, like I said earlier, I think everybody has like a diverse palette. I like a lot of queer stories as well. So I like to read like a lot of wholesome stuff. I just bought a book at a convention last week that I've been reading from paper cuts from a Mad Cave Chef's Kiss that's been really cute. So, I think everything's an entry point. I started with the horror. Now I'm just like, oh, let me read anything that kind of like jumps out at me. And I've always wanted to create. I was actually, my first comic that I made, my own horror book comic, started out as like a novel script that I was writing. And then I was like, oh, I like comics, and this is very visual in my mind. Let me like take a stab at making it a comic, since I've been a Lifeline fan. And that ended up being the right path for that book and for me, and it got me into this world, which has been super cool.
Phil, I think
you're producing. Go straight. There you go, mate. You go.
Phil, I think you're the best person to advise Bo, because he's been telling us for as long as we know him that he wants to put something out.
Mm-hmm.
Comics, I mean, comics. So for people like him, what would be your advice? How would you go about doing it?
My advice is to do it. Like, I think the first step, I don't know if you're an artist or a writer or both, but I think the first step is getting something on the page, writing the script, getting a completed first draft at least that you like, and then being like, all right, let's take the next step, whether that's you drawing it yourself, trying to partner with an artist. There's the great thing about the indie comic community. Let me start here. The great thing about comics is that it's a relatively low barrier to entry, especially in recent years, where like Webtoon and Kickstarter are platforms that anyone can join and anyone can find an audience in. I didn't work with a larger publisher until about a year ago, and I've been doing comics for 4 years now. And you can find major success just doing it yourself, and like with teaming up with like artists and letterers and colorists, et cetera, that you find online. So I would say the first, if you have the creating bug, create something, write a script, and then be like, all right, let's figure out where the next step is. That whether that's making like a preview and pitching that around to publishers, trying to kickstart a book and building a brand and an audience yourself, putting it on a webcomic platform for people to read for free. I think resources are obviously a determining factor for a lot of people if they want to go and like invest in the comic and work to make that profit over time. I know my first comic was an investment. I made my first issue at a loss, and I think I recouped my investment on like issue 3. And thankfully now we have a pretty dedicated audience and are able to have a good business model. But different people have different paths.
Yeah, cool, man. Yeah,
Steve. You're gonna keep interrupting me. All good. Seriously. So obviously, mate, you're producing a lot of content between the comics that you're writing and your webtoons and things. Is this pretty much almost a full-time gig for you now? Just the amount of content, everything you're putting out, or?
It's definitely a full-time gig. Like I said, I work pretty much 50-50 with Kat, with my co-creator and the co-creator of Lifeline Comics, and it's 100% her full-time thing. I have my day job that I'm locked in for a few months for boring business reasons, but it's basically right now 2 full-time jobs. I'm definitely putting in the minimum 40 hours to comics every month. And as soon as I have the opportunity to only be doing that in a couple of months, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. But it's been great. It's only been in that position for about 1.5 years. Before that, comics were hugely important to us and we were finding success. But now it's a more recent within the last 2 years thing that it's like, oh, like this is successful enough and reliable enough to sustain yourself. And I think there's a big reputation when it comes to creativity, like, oh, you can't like survive doing this, but like there's plenty of people who do. All it is really putting in the time and, you know, finding your groove and your audience and just putting stuff out there. And, you know, we interacted with plenty of people who are doing exactly that.
Wow, I can't believe you've only been around for 4 years. When I see the Kickstarters and how many people are contributing to it and the money and all that, that's quite an accomplishment. I would have thought you'd been around a lot longer.
I'll say that Kat's been in a few years longer than me. She's been in about 8 years as a creator, and then before that, she was a YouTube comic reviewer for I think probably like 11 years or so now. So I got a little bit of a jump start by partnering with her when she was 3 years into her career, so that helped me out. But you know, even so, it's neither of us would ever deny like it's been crazy fast and it's been a whirlwind and it's been very rewarding to see just how much, you know, we've been able to grow and find our niche and find our audience.
Hey, Troy. All right. Well, let's take a look at some stuff here, mate. What's the first one you want to take a look at? You've sent us your current Kickstarter, an upcoming Kickstarter, your webtoons, and also the Etsy with all the merch, which is very impressive that you produce all of that as well.
Yeah, that's definitely. If you're all right with it, let's start with the webtoon since we already talked about that a little bit, so we can give like a visual aid. So we all saw Slice of Life behind you, the print edition, and now this is the webcomic version where there we go. Every week we post a new episode. Thank you. Every week we post a new episode on Webtoon. If you want to click on any of them, maybe just like the top one there, in that list. There you go. Okay. So unlike the comic where it's just like traditional comic pages, we convert it to a vertical scroll. It's meant to be read on a phone, but obviously you could do it on your computer here, like you see, where we put the panels on top of each other. And every week we post a new episode. It's a really rewarding way to release a comic because people get to see these characters every single week in little installments. We usually release effectively 2 pages of the actual comic a week. And then that works out to like, 10 to 12 panels usually. It lets people really live with the characters, have them as part of their daily routine, which is really cool. And every week when a new episode goes up, it's the potential to pick up new readers, new subscribers who might read from the beginning. So, this is our most recent episode, which leads up to a very big moment that we're getting close to. We just, I won't let you spoil it if you want to exit out. So I don't want to spoil something when you just read the first one. But the cool thing about Webtoon is that you also can leave the platform. Like there's a Patreon button over there where that's one of our other release methodologies where people can subscribe to our Patreon. Yeah, that button there. And they can get early access to episodes. So we share, I think, 6 episodes in advance of what's on Webtoon. And then it's like a subscription model. We also give them bonus chapters and they can like vote on art they want to see every month. So, that's one corner of our business is the Webtoon Patreon side of it. And this is our Patreon. There's like different tiers available. So, and that has its own community, which is really cool too. We have, I think like 400 patrons right now. And whenever a new episode goes up, it's always nice. And we do discussion posts too, which is really cool. It's something we added recently where it's nice to see people just like talk specifically about the world of the comics. So it's really cool. You can build like a whole ecosystem around one property.
This is such a great idea because as the guys know, we deal with a lot of Australian comic book creators. And so many of them are just brilliant and such talented work. But I don't believe we've ever seen anybody go down this route before with a webcomic first. That is a really, really good idea.
No, it's really rewarding. And you wouldn't think that people would want to buy a physical copy of a comic they can read online for free, but that's really not our finding. It's that people become a fan, like a big fan of this comic that they get every week because they spend so much time within the characters. And like, oh, I want to get a print version of that. I want to own it, or I want to read the chapters that are exclusive to the Kickstarter version, to the comic version that aren't on the webcomic. So it's really cool. And one thing I'll also add in here, since we've jumped on so many platforms, Kickstarter, Patreon, Webtoon, like not all of this happened overnight. Like, it's a lot of trial and error. We've tried platforms that didn't work out too, that ended up, we sunk a lot of time and some money into and didn't end up working. So one bit of advice I'd give to anyone who's looking to create is just try everything. And if it doesn't work out, you could stop and, just stick with what does work. We found an audience through Webtoon and Patreon. So that's been a big part of our model and Kickstarter, but, not everything's going to work, but you don't know until you try, until you start throwing things at the wall.
Well, one thing that I found as well is when it comes to reading a brand new world, brand new characters and all that, sometimes it's kind of hard for me personally to legitimately like the supporting cast in a lot, because you're so used to all the supporting casts in all the many Marvel and DC and all these other comics. But I've got to say, when I read Slice of Life, it was like jumping into a comic that I knew already. The supporting cast was actually really easy to start enjoying and start liking. So how do you come up with a new voice for each character? Because that must be a little hard.
That really does mean the world, because I'm a lover of supported casts. Whenever I watch like a new TV show or read a new comic, I'm one who tends to gravitate towards like the ancillary characters. Like, I love the main characters, but I really like to invest in an ensemble. So that's something I like to incorporate into the writing a lot. And Slice of Life in particular, like, you have your core story about your anime character who came to life, but like, as we're going along, you have your core romance, the anime character and the closeted cheerleader she falls in love with. But another major character is the sister of the cheerleader, who's like a super fan of the anime. And, I keep saying this about the Webtoon, but the really cool thing about it, because it's constant, because we're always writing it and always posting like on the weekly, and there's so many pages, you get the time to spend. You have more time to spend with each character. We could do a chapter just about that sister character and really get into her head. And then, the cheerleader, the closeted cheerleader's ex-boyfriend, we did a chapter introducing him and what he means for like our cheerleader character. And then we'd spend some time alone with him and be like, oh, this is what makes him tick. And then pair him up with another character. And then, it just kind of snowballs from there, where everything starts as like, how does this inform our existing characters? How does this inform our existing plot? And it's like, oh, is there an opportunity to maybe spend like a 4-page chapter with this character and get acquainted with them better? And that's one of the things we love most about Slice of Life, is that it's a story about life from the perspective of a whole bunch of different people, a whole bunch of different flawed teenagers who are flawed in very different ways, I think is one way we like to pitch it.
Yeah. So Troy's big on manga, and their Slice of Life category emphasizes supporting cast as much as the main character. It's all support pillars to the main mast. It's a great genre.
Completely agree. That's one of Slice of Life, I'll say, hasn't been a great title for searchability, because when you Google Slice of Life, you just get a whole bunch of like genre posts or like the best Slice of Life anime or manga. But I don't think I would change it, because it's so perfect for the kind of story we're trying to tell. Yeah.
So do you throw any of yourself into these characters at all?
Oh yeah, I think there's a little bit of myself and Kat in every single character. Some less than others, obviously. I think a good example of two ends of like the spectrum is we have the anime fan sister character, who's like a super geeky, like very excitable anime nerd, but also like a shy loner who's very introverted. And then on the other hand, you have a popular, not her sister, but another character, a popular cheerleader who's a little bit of a bully, and like her gut reaction when she's challenged is to like bite someone's head off and be mean. And we think of them as foils, as like kind of opposite characters of each other, but there are elements to each of them that are very specific to different parts of mine and Kat's personalities. I think both of us are obviously huge geeks. We're comic creators. It comes with the territory. So we see that in Raven, our fan, the anime fan, but also, I think everybody is lonely sometimes, or doesn't like have the words in the moment to connect with people. And that's something that, at least once in everyone's life, even the most extroverted person has experienced. And it's really cathartic to channel that for her. And then for Chris, the cheerleader character, I mean, we've all had a bad moment where we were hot-headed and bit someone's head off, and then kind of had to like reevaluate and be like, I know I was mean in that moment and I don't want to be that person, but sometimes that's your gut reaction. So I think it's just with each character finding that like that bit of humanity that like really resonates with you. That's a really important part of our process, especially for this story.
how much of the characters that started out with a certain trait, like the ones that you've just described, start to evolve into into someone else, or they've grown into a different person?
Yeah.
Um,
Honestly,
did it?
all of them. I think.
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted. I think every character kind of starts as like a log line where you're like, this is the anime nerd, this is the bully cheerleader, and then as you're writing, like they kind of their flavors are filled in. I'll use the bully cheerleader character as an example. She originally she was just meant to be someone who challenges our anime nerd character and is like mean towards her, and then it's like, okay, why is she like that? Like, what's her home life like? Like, what's her social situation? She's a cheerleader. Is she friends with our lead character who's a cheerleader? Is she in a relationship? And then it's like you kind of fill out the details. What's her sexuality? We learn she's bisexual, but she's not out to everyone. Like, what are all of the million little things that make you not just that log line that you started with, that the bully cheerleader, but make you like a fleshed out character? I think all of our main cast and our supporting cast kind of take that approach where it's like you have that line you could summarize someone as, just like you could summarize me as, that's Phil, he's a comic creator from New York, and then you slowly see all the little bubbles inside. That's like, he loves horror, he can't stay up past 11 o'clock, like all the little details that kind of make you a fully fleshed out character. And that's our approach to creating characters and, you know, discovering things about them over time.
Yeah, beauty. All right, let's take a look at your current Kickstarter.
We'll go from wholesome to a little less wholesome, a little more sexy. So what you're pulling up now is The Beast in Snow. We're crowdfunding right now our second issue of the series, and it's a vampire Snow White and a werewolf Belle. It's a not safe for work comic. It has lots of sex, gore, nudity. And our approach to building this book, our first issue we crowdfunded in August of last year, and it blew up. It was by far our most successful Kickstarter. It had over 2,000 backers. It raised over $80,000 US.
Wow.
And it was a culmination. Like, we had up to this point been putting a lot of effort into developing like a queer audience through Slice of Life, through our anthologies we did, By Visibility. Rainbow Canvas was another one that was like a collection of queer webcomic short stories. So we put in a lot of time building a queer audience, and then all of them and a bunch of new people came out and they're like, oh yeah, sexy vampire werewolf romance with fairy tale characters, that's such an easy sell. So that's become a really big part of our business, is these, like, we call them, it's a shared universe we call the Ever Afterverse, where they all take place in the same universe. This book, The Beast in Snow, our Witches of Oz book we talked about earlier, and then our third book, Nightmare in Wonderland, which is Sleeping Beauty meets Alice in Wonderland, and they both get their exes and they get stuck in a nightmare version of Wonderland. So yeah, it's kind of the anti-Slice of Life. I don't think we went into it trying to create it that way, but we wanted like a really confident, like sexy lead with our vampire who, you know, kind of, for the Slice of Life characters are communicative, like almost to like a fault. They're very like wholesome. They like always like kind of talk about how they're feeling, versus our Snow White character who kind of just like pushes her way into a situation, and it gets her involved with this werewolf, and they're kind of stuck in this castle together now and have to survive the day with each other, and, you know, start to maybe fall for each other and feel things for each other. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun playing in that different sandbox, and it's been really rewarding. And with this new issue now, it's been cool also. We love introducing characters, like you said before. So to introduce new characters, this one you see here is our huntsman, who's one of our villains, the huntsman from the Snow White story, who also happens to be Snow White's ex and who really wants to kill her. And then here we have our preview. Our first issue was very heavy on the Snow White vampire element of the book. So our second issue here is very heavy on the werewolf element. So, you know, we start out seeing Belle in her hometown versus Princess Snow White. You know, she was poor. She had to do the shit jobs no one liked, and her family was torn apart by war when her mother was drafted and killed. And then, you know, as if she needed to be kicked when she was down, a werewolf attack separates her from her father and then ends up infecting her with werewolfism. So that's how we open this issue, with this like intro into who she is and learning more about her. And you can see some cool action and gore here. So have a lot of fun with it. It's really cool getting to scratch a different itch and see like a very different kind of story than what we just looked at.
I love the artwork, mate. It's stunning artwork.
Yeah, we Dorilis Giacchetto is an Italian artist, and we have the pleasure of working with her as the interior artist on this book. We actually found her Hairology, one of our anthologies, just a collection of short stories about hair. She applied to that, and we were like, "Oh, we love working with you on Hairology. Would you want to do like a sexy book?" And she's like, "I love sexy." So,
So are you with the same artist all the time, or is it different artists for different books?
Every book has a different artist. I shouldn't say every book, because sometimes we'll use the same artist on multiple books. We have a detective series that has the same artist as our horror book, Haunting. But for the most part, we tend to work with different artists on each book, which is cool because it gives you different flavors. And, you know, the art style of Slice of Life might not appeal to a reader, but maybe they'll like The Beast in Snow or The Witches of Oz. So it's good to get that variety out there. And then, you know, these are some of our covers. We leaned into the werewolf angle for a lot of them. Some of them will be a little sexy, warning.
How far ahead of this story have you prepared, like for Beast in Snow?
We're pretty far. We're big planners, so you know, with Slice of Life, we plan like pretty much like we knew the parts we're writing right now were at least partially planned 3 years ago, and like obviously details fill in. Like, you know, a character comes in who becomes bigger than you planned, like the bully cheerleader. Maybe she was meant to be in the story, but she wasn't meant to have as big a role, or she wasn't meant to have like a sister who's really important. So that fills out the story over time. But we have like pretty detailed outlines for The Beast in Snow. We have a 4-issue arc plan. This is our 2nd issue, and then that leads into a crossover with our other Ever Afterverse books, our other dark fairy tale books, The Witches of Oz and Nightmare in Wonderland. So we have that planned, and then we have loose plans a little bit after that, which, you know, we fill in over time as you meet these characters and develop that world. But you know, we try to plan just enough that we know where we're going, but not so much that we can't add in extra stuff when we see like, oh, people really like this character in particular. Let's make sure we do a lot with her, or they like this element of her backstory. Let's dive into that more.
I guess that leaves you with a little bit more flexibility and doesn't box you in with your preconceived ideas of the stories that you want to tell, or the details that come after that.
Absolutely. Yeah, we love I hate writing without a plan. Like, I would never want to dive into something. Free writing is a valid writing technique. Let me say that. Like, plenty of amazingly talented authors free write without a plan and kind of just go as they go. That's not the kind of writer I am or Kat is. We like to know what we're driving towards, but leave enough open where, yeah, you have flexibility. You could like go in a different direction. Actually, The Beast in Snow here is a really good example. This issue too that we ended up making ended up being a lot different from the original plan. Like some key points are the same, but we changed a lot of the direction as we were going. And part of that was with the response to issue 1. People were like, I really love Snow. I love her voice. And this 2nd issue is more werewolf heavy. There's more Belle from Beauty and the Beast heavy. But we were like, oh, we can't lose Snow's voice entirely. So we like changed a lot of the plot points to make sure that she doesn't get swallowed up entirely by Belle's story. That's like one example of how, you know, you have the flexibility. It's our lenticular covers, which have been pretty cool.
I love how much you have on offer with your Kickstarters. That's one of the things that really jumped out at me, because again, working with Australian creators, I've got a bit of an idea now as to how much all of this can cost you to create. So to be able to have lenticular covers, and on your new Slice of Life, I saw you have a metal cover. You've got trading cards, you've got pins, you've got so much that it's honestly amazing that you've got so much to be able to offer.
Thank you. It definitely didn't all come at once. You know, it was like one thing at a time. It's like, okay, our first Kickstarter, I think the only thing we really offered, I shouldn't say we, I'll talk about my first Kickstarter before I partnered with Kat and did Lifeline. I only offered comics, and I think I had like one sticker that I was like researching sticker manufacturers. And then, you know, the next Kickstarter, you're like, all right, let's and I had a variant cover. I had my comic, my variant cover, and I had like a sticker. And then my next issue, I was like, let's do another variant cover. Like, let's try shirts, which isn't something we do anymore because we clothes are a big beast that we'll figure out a different day. But like it's trial and error. So like we at a certain point we were like, okay, shirts didn't work out for us. Let's try enamel pins. And when we look at the Etsy store later, which is one of the links that I send you, I'll talk about that, how pins became like a side business for us by accident through our comics. And then trading cards were really fun. We added that when we did that first crossover I mentioned earlier, where Kat and I did a superhero horror crossover. We were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we did like collectible trading cards? And fans of those books like went wild for them. And now we're like, let's do trading cards on every single project. And then metal covers at one point, we happened across the manufacturer when we were at a convention, and they like pitched like, oh, like this is how much it costs to make metal covers. This is the process. We're like, that sounds cool. Let's try it out. And people really like that. And then lenticulars, similarly, we saw like a friend of ours doing lenticulars, like, let's try that. So the answer is just building over time. Like definitely no one does all of these things at once, but it's cool that over time, every Kickstarter, you pick up a new trick and you learn what your readers like and what they want to see more of in the next campaigns.
I love this cover. I really, really wanted to, like, I'm not going to lie, Phil. I had to back out of Slice of Life with the latest one because I wanted to get this metal cover, and it's because I really don't buy single issues. I just buy collected editions. But I've got to admit, I'm regretting it because I loved that. That was such a beautiful cover.
We really love this cover. Skylar Patridge was the artist. She's worked on Wonder Woman, Supergirl. We've met her at a few conventions and became friendly with her, and she was like, "Oh, I'd love to work with you." And we had her on another book of ours, Nightmare in Wonderland, one of our fairy tale books. And we were like, how would you like to do Slice of Life? And she was like, oh, I actually have read that before. I would love to do the cover. And it was so cool and so popular. So we really love that cover. And, you might have your chance someday. We're going to see what the hardcover edition of our second volume will be. But obviously that's a little ways away. We'll see what other covers we have. But I'll say that one's definitely a contender. To be recycled as a hardcover someday.
And then you've got these collector boxes, which are really impressive as well. How did you pull this guy? I'm not going to try and pronounce this name.
Stefan Sedgwick, yeah.
Stefan Sedgwick, yeah. Honestly, that one, the credit for that goes to Kat. Kat, as I said, she's a comic reviewer, and she had become friendly with Stefan just by talking about his comics before. So they would see each other at conventions once a year and they were friendly. And then, schedules just aligned where we had this book coming up and we were like, we want like a killer comic artist. Oh, there we go. I love it. And we just asked him, we were like, hey, we have this like vampire werewolf romance. Like, would you be interested? And he's like, I have an opening in my schedule. Yeah, let's do it. And we got this cover, which honestly made the Kickstarter. I don't think it would have blown up the way it did if we didn't have that Sedgwick cover. And then with this second issue, the thumbnail cover, the one that you saw at the top of the screen, is actually from Linda Sedgwick, from Stefan's wife, because we had such a pleasure working with him. And we're friendly with her too, because they table together often at conventions. We were like, oh, how would you like to do? We could have like a set of Sedgwick covers. And she was like, that's so fun. Let's do it. So, it's at conventions. I've mentioned them a few times. They're such a great way to network and to build those connections, to get to work with different people. And especially people who we probably wouldn't have had access to otherwise at our level, like Stefan.
Yeah, it's almost a shame that I didn't read Slice of Life before, because all these add-ons I didn't get at the time, because I thought I'm just going to get the hardcover. And as you're probably aware, the conversion really raises it a lot for overseas. But there was quite a bit that once I read it, I'm like, oh, I wish I got a pin, or I wish I got some cards.
I'll say you'll always have the opportunity. We always try to make everything available as add-ons. So next time you see a collected edition you want, you could probably get pins that you missed out on or something like that.
Oh, great.
And we always pride ourselves on people can shoot us a message. If there's something where it's I wish I got this on that Kickstarter and I don't see it on this one. If you just message us, be like, oh yeah, we could put that in for you. That's a cool thing about Kickstarter is it's direct creator to consumer communication. So we love working with people and getting them the stuff they want. When we do Kickstarters monthly, we know the same people aren't going to support them every month. Just if I was a publisher putting comics into stores every week, I know there's going to be very few people who get every single comic we publish. So, we try to be flexible and, help out the people who are like, okay, this is the one I'm going to jump on. I want this collected edition. Let me also get all the other stuff I've been waiting to get, especially internationally.
Yeah. Wow. That is, beautiful work there, isn't it?
Thank you. And then, yeah, this is just the add-on section at the bottom where we list out, like, you can get this Kickstarter is for the Beast and Snow, but then you can get our other books, like our Witches of Oz books and Slice of Life and our horror book and all that. So it's a very busy page. It's become honestly a second job just building these pages and having to put all of our stuff on them. We actually we hired my brother. He does some of that work for us now, where when we have a new Kickstarter coming up, we're like, all right, here's a list of everything to put on the page. And he's like, great, that sounds like fun.
So we're nearly at the end now of this Kickstarter. Nightmare in Wonderland was one that had some really cool covers too.
Yeah, that one on the bottom right corner is from the same Slice of Life artist that we talked about before for that cover that you liked, Skylar Patridge. So really cool. We got to work with her twice this year.
And again, the mystery boxes. How popular are they?
Pretty popular. We started selling them at conventions first, because a lot of the times people would be like, oh, I'm overwhelmed, you have so many books here, like this box is cool because I don't have to pick what I want, I can get an assortment, and then, like, you know, I know I'm going to get the series pictured on the box, but I might also get other stuff. And then we're like, oh, this works really well at cons, why don't we try it on Kickstarters too? And then it's a good way to get, you know, like I said before, someone who's like, oh, I really like the werewolf books, but then, like, they get our supernatural horror book and they're like, oh, I like this. It's a good way to, like, get people to expand out and check out other stuff. And these are all our pins, which like I said earlier, we didn't set out to have, like, a massive library of enamel pins. We started out just doing some tie-in pins with Slice of Life. You see on the bottom here, some of these are Slice of Life. And then with our bisexual anthology, Bi Visibility, and those pins ended up being so popular, and people would be like, oh, do you have other, like, sexualities? Do you have, like, lesbian pins or gay pins? And we were like, oh yeah, we could add those. And then it just snowballed from here. And now it's like, whenever we do a new book, like our Witches of Oz book, we're like, let's put a rainbow witch hat, or Nightmare in Wonderland, let's do our, like, Assassin Alice there at number 37. So it kind of became its own thing. And it's a big part of our business, honestly. When you look at our monthly profits or our sales at a convention, pins they always take up a good chunk, which is cool. Like, and a lot of people surprisingly would get into comics from the pins. Whenever we sell a pin, we give a little business card that has a QR code you can scan to read Slice of Life for free. And there've been a lot of people who's like, oh, I never really read comics, but because I just had this QR code, I could read something for free. I checked it out, and now I like this. So it's been cool getting that translation as well.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to get number 30 and 31. I've got a jacket that I put some pins on.
I love it. Number 31 is definitely the most popular. People like the full couple there. This is that crossover I told you about. That was the first collaboration between Kat and myself. It was our Superheroes Meet the Supernatural book. And then these are the individual series that crossed over. My Haunting was my first book, my horror book. And then, like, Follow Like Daughter there was Kat's first book, her superhero book. And then from there, everything else is built. This is Kat's other superhero book, the one that's, like, darker and more, like, gritty, The Dancer. And that one's going to be our next graphic novel that we collect. So if you like gritty superheroes, that might be a good one to check out. And then these are our anthologies, the collections of short stories where we take submissions from people all over the world and tell stories about bisexuality or hair or queer romance or whatever have you. Hairology there was just nominated for a Ringo, which was really cool. That was news this week. So, and we had Gail Simone write the forward for that. That was, like, a really so.
Wow.
Cool. And then every Kickstarter, not every Kickstarter, but a lot of Kickstarters will offer stretch goals after they hit their funding goal. They'll be like, oh, as we hit new things, let's, like, add new stuff. So we'll give, like, one thing we do with every Kickstarter is we have an indie bundle where every backer will get, like, a collection of digital comics that are donated from other indie creators. It's mutually beneficial because backers get more stuff to read, and then indie creators get their books in front of new people. So that's always really cool.
I can attest to that. When I got the hardcover, I got an indie comic book pack, and there was a whole bunch of comics in it, man. And a lot of them were really, really cool.
Yeah,
really, really good reading.
It's a perfect example of how the community on Kickstarter and indie comics is, like, really, like, close knit and, like, really invested in helping each other out. Kat and I give our books to other people's bundles all the time, and we always have people say, "Oh yeah, I read this because I backed someone else, and now I want to check out your book because of that." So it's really great that everyone's so close knit and willing to work together. And we just announced all of our last stretch goals today, so that's what we're seeing here. So that's cool. And then the last audio commentary. And then the last thing is backer goals, as it's like the stretch goals, except with dollar amounts, it's backer counts. Every milestone we hit, we add a new book to the bundle based on like what was offered to us by our peers. So that's
I love that homage.
Oh yeah, that's really cool. It's a friend of ours, his werewolf book, and he was like, "Oh, you have a werewolf book? You wanna have my werewolf book in yours?" And we're like, "Yeah, that sounds fun." And I know we had a lot of scrolling, but now we're finally almost at the bottom. So that's
this is all really cool to see.
What a great content.
There we go. Now we hit the bottom. You did it.
Okay, so let's see. Go all the way back to the top.
I know I make you do a lot of scrolling. One day we have to cut some stuff out. I know it's hard to decide what to since there's so much stuff.
No, but it's also good to see all the different content out there as well.
Oh yeah.
You know, people are very loyalist as well, and once they become Lifeline comic fans, they might just want to grab everything. You never know.
We definitely have plenty of supporters who are of that mentality. I talked earlier about shirts, how we had shirts on our first few Kickstarters, and we were like, this is a little too much to keep up with. When we got rid of them, we had a couple people who were like, I've been collecting shirts every Kickstarter. You can't get rid of them. We're like, I'm sorry, we can't do this right now. One day we'll figure out how to do it better, and then you can get more shirts. And they're like, fine. But that's always fun.
So what are we looking at here?
So this is just our next project, Mob Princess. It's a new issue 1, and it's the journey to becoming a made woman, a princess, a like spoiled college girl who is a little directionless in her life. Her father is murdered, and she learns that she's inherited his empire, and is now a mob boss in his stead. So this one's written by Kat specifically. She wrote this actually a few years ago as a TV script, and we adapted it into a comic more recently. So this one's launching in like 2 weeks. So I thought it'd be a fun one to just like pull up the pre-launch page for here. And we're really excited for that one. We like breaking into another genre with like, mob storytelling. So that's always really cool. We try to launch at least like 3 new properties a year, as well as continuing all of our existing properties. That way we're keeping things fresh, but never like abandoning a story, always continuing what we start until it reaches its natural conclusion.
All of these links will be in the description. Once we finish the show, I'll be adding all of that in there. So don't worry if you can't write all these down. This will have The Beast in the Snow, the current Kickstarter, this upcoming Kickstarter, the webtoons, and last but not least, let's now take a look at the Etsy.
Yeah. We don't have to spend a lot of time in this one, but just to illustrate what we talked about before with the pins, it all started out with just like, oh, Slice of Life is getting popular on Webtoon. Let's give them some merch to check out. Let's do pins of the characters. And then we had our bisexual anthology. It was like, let's do some pins to tie in with that, some bisexual pins. And then it honestly just snowballed from there. We threw them on Etsy as just another platform we knew pins did well on. And they really took a life of their own. Like, we move a good number of pins every week on Etsy, and we've just expanded the sets now. We try to release like 3 new sets of pins a year with like 5 or 6 pins each. And it's become a second business. And it's a good example of like, you never know what you're going to fall into. Like when we started making comics, neither Kat nor I were like huge pin people. We had pins, we put them on like our backpacks and stuff, but we just happened to fall into it and found like an audience that was really into pins with their comics. And we're like, oh, let's do both. And it's cool coming up with new pin designs. And you see here, we also sell our comics on our Etsy store just to, have them available. We don't move a ton of comics on Etsy. Most people don't come to Etsy for comics. They'll come for things like pins or like, hoodies or like embroidery or et cetera. But it's always good to have it because you never know if someone's like, oh, I checked out your pins and then I checked out your webtoon and now I want to go back to Etsy and buy Slice of Life. That's happened before. So it's more of that throwing things at the wall and just seeing what sticks and kind of learning from there.
Well, I like how you've also got the, where is it? This one. You've got the plush doll as well.
Oh yeah, we that's the plush doll as seen in the comic. Yeah, it's
yeah.
Vengeance. We actually we jumped the gun with that a little bit. Like we made that plush doll right at the beginning with our issue 1, and plushes are expensive. We learned that was in the long run, we made back our money, but we were in the hole for a long time on Slice Life because we bought so many plush dolls, because you can't do a small plush doll order. You have to get a whole bunch of them. But in the long run, it worked out. But that's a good. I've been talking about our successes the whole time. I also got to talk about our failures. So that was some try as you go and learn your lesson. And then, in the long run, as long as you keep trying it, it works out. But I'm glad we have the plush dolls.
So what's your future goals?
Future goals, honestly, just keep doing what we're doing. This is a dream come true. This is what I've always wanted to do, is just like be able to, make a living telling stories. And, thankfully we're at that point. And I just want to keep doing that. We love Webtoon. Slice Life's our only book that we publish on Webtoon, and it's built for Webtoon. It caters specifically to what that audience really likes to read. So, one of our goals for the next year is to start a second Webtoon. Something very different from Slice Life, something that's a little more like action oriented, but still like friendly to that audience. So, that's one goal, is to, continuously create. We try to put out new series all the time, but like also across different platforms. We want to break into the direct market a little more, whether that's work for hire or like putting some of our books like into stores more, because most of our publishing has been self-publishing, been like self-distribution ourselves, which is great because you control it and you get to keep a bigger slice of the profits, but it also limits your reach as much as if you're not in the comic book store. You're not part of that weekly conversation. So I think now that we've kind of figured out the self-publishing sphere, I think that's one of our big goals in the next year, is to figure out that other slice of the pie and get more on people's minds. And we're taking steps in that direction. So it's cool. It's really cool about comics that there's no one path, that different people take different paths and find success in them. And, it's just trying different things and finding what you like and what you're good at, and trying to do a little bit of everything so that you know what's out there and you connect with as many different people as possible.
Beautiful. Sharif, Steve, you got anything for our lovely guest before we go?
I just want to say, Phil, thank you very much for jumping on today, mate, and having a chat with us. And I wish you the greatest of success. You've got some amazing stuff coming out.
Thank you.
I hope it just keeps going gangbusters for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.
Yeah, Phil, thank you so much. You've been a terrific guest. There's nothing worse than inviting somebody on and they don't talk very much. You have managed to fill out the hour. Thank you so much for being so accommodating. Really appreciate you staying up late for us. And yeah, I look forward to a lot more of your work. If you ever want to come back on the show with Kat, by all means, reach out. If you ever want to promote your future projects, by all means, reach out. We would be more than happy to have you back on the Aussieverse.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure talking. And thank you for supporting Kickstarter Comics. We couldn't do this without people just taking a chance like you did. So thank you for that.
Fantastic. Well, then, before we do go, we've got one question to ask you. Sharif, I believe you have a question for Phil.
Yes, if there's one thing you could describe what Aussieverse is, what is it?
For life.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. This has been Phil Falco from Lifeline Comics. Go check out his Kickstarter. Go check out the Etsys. Check out the future work. Check out the past work, because you can still buy that stuff. I'm going to be grabbing some pins. Go check it out now. They have so much out there. It is absolutely fantastic. You want to be heartfelt and touched, and I mean that in a good way. Go check out Lifeline Comics. It is absolutely fantastic. We will catch you next time. And the last thing I do need to say is that yesterday's show with OmniDog has been rescheduled to tonight. We will be live at 9 p.m. So if you are so inclined and you don't have much on, please check us out tonight. Aussieverse crossing over with OmniDog. Phil Falco, freaking awesome, man. Thank you so much for coming. We will be back with Phil one day, hopefully. That's all we've got to say.
Thank you.
Catch you next time.